Yeah.
Oh, I do have one elf joke.
Ooh, you got
which
an elf
is probably
joke.
more applicable to the deck. Okay. What is an elf's favorite type of picture?
What is an elf's favorite type of picture?
An elfie.
I get it, because it's like selfie, but it's elf. Hello, friendos. This is Shane. Welcome you back to Chain of Commander, and it is time for our monthly visit to the Recruitment Office, where we bring on real players to talk about the decks that they care a lot about. For today's episode, I figured I'd bring in one of the first friends I've made in my YouTube content creation lifespan here, and have him share his story about one of his favorite decks. Now, before I introduce my very special guest, I will say I'll put a deck list in the description there for you folks to reference at your leisure. And yeah, if anything we say really inspires a deck building spark inspired you, just consider using that TCG Player affiliate link. It won't cost you a single cent more, but it will help out the channel. All the self-plugging aside, let me have our guest introduce himself here.
Hello everyone, my name is Brandon and I run the Create Commander YouTube channel. I'm also on Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter, all under the same name at Create Commander, so I'm pretty easy to find. I mainly focus on trying to help entry-level players enter the format and figure out ways to learn card interactions and construct decks that might be a little bit more unique or fun to you or fit within your budget range. But this personal deck of mine is probably the one that I've invested the most in, so it's a little bit of a breakaway for me, so I'm excited to talk about it.
All right, and what is that deck? Who's your commander here?
The commander of this deck is Marwyn the Nurturer, and she is 2 and a green. She's a legendary elf druid and a 1/1, but she gets a +1/+1 counter for every elf that enters the battlefield after her, and then you can tap her for green, based on the number of +1/+1 counters that she has. So the more elves you play, or the more elves you get after she's been on the battlefield, the more mana she taps for. So this is very much an elf tribal deck, and tribal commander is one of my most favorite things.
All right, and what's the kind of like the deck's goal here? How does the deck's primary strategy play out?
So the deck itself it's also a combo deck, which is something else that I love to do. You'll even see on some of my YouTube videos where I'll build a $30 mono black deck that still has a combo in it, just because that's who I am. But Marwyn getting out as early as she possibly can, and then slapping down a couple of elves, hopefully getting something like Umbral Mantle or something like that to generate infinite mana, draw the deck, find Finale of Devastation, and smash down with giant elfie beats.
Elfie beats! And how did this deck come to be? What kind of inspired you to build this particular deck?
So this one came about because I was getting more into the competitive side of Commander and the more higher powered portion of Commander for a little while, and I wanted something because we were having some competitive Commander events at my local LGS, but none of the stuff that I had, my Lord Windgrace deck and stuff like that was not combo based or not anything like that. Pretty much I didn't have a deck that could win by turn 5, pretty much, and if you don't have one at a competitive event, you're basically wasting your money, in my opinion. So I just needed something that consistently could, if you leave it alone, win turn 3, 4, and turn 5. And that's basically how this deck came to function. I drew a lot of inspiration from this deck from the CEDH database. There are a few pieces missing from it just because I don't have the personal budget to afford them, such as Gaia's Cradle and some of the other bigger dollar things. But, a lot of it stemmed from there, and just, again, my love of tribal commander in general. The fact that I could play something competitively, but also still play tribal commander, which is something that I love. That's really the reason that I wanted to build this deck.
Yeah, and if there's ever a tribe that remains competitive through all formats, it's pretty much elves. Goblins, sometimes they come up to be quite a competitive tribe themselves, but elves, you see it Legacy, you see it in Modern, elves are everywhere.
For sure. Yeah, elves are very strong, just because, it doesn't really matter what color pairing you're in. If you have the capability of utilizing the 1-drop elves in your colors, you are usually significantly better off for it, whether it's an Elvish Mystic to ramp or a Deathrite Shaman to start monkeying with people's graveyards or whatever it might be.
Yeah, unfortunately, can't play Deathrite Shaman in Marwyn, despite him being definitely a pretty useful, powerful little elf himself. That rhymed. But let's obviously we can't play Deathrite Shaman though. What are some of the key elves in this deck? What are like the little tiny elves that really overcame your expectations of them?
So the elves that really make the deck tick are another 1-drop elf, which is Quirion Ranger, which obviously once we got Ashaya from what is that set? Zendikar Rising, and turns everything into a forest. Well, Quirion Ranger is a 1-drop. You can return a forest you control to your hand, and then you untap a creature. So my Llanowar elf is a forest because of Ashaya, so you can bounce it back to your hand, untap Marwyn, tap for a boatload more mana, and you're off to the races from there. Another one that obviously does a boatload of work in this deck is Priest of Titania. That's just a generally strong card, whether you have a couple of elves. That thing tapping for more than one is just amazing. And then obviously some of the other normal elves that you would probably think of, Elvish Arch Druid tapping for a bunch of mana, and honestly the one that probably surprised me the most, I think is going to be probably Seeker of Skybreak, because Seeker, it's repeatable untapping. So if you need to on multiple turns untap something or use it as an untap effect yourself, and you can repeatedly untap it, it's free, and you can untap Marwyn as many times as you need to if you have an ability to untap Seeker of Skybreak. So that's probably the little elf that goes in this deck pretty well.
All right. Yeah, I can honestly say before today I have not even heard of Seeker of Skybreak, but yeah, being able to get that repeat use out of Marwyn's ramp out of it is pretty darn solid, not gonna lie. All right, now let's kind of look more big picture with this deck as far as playing it, how you kind of navigate a game. What are you doing early game? What are you doing mid game? How does the deck finally close out? Take us through a general, a common deck of play style, or not play style, but kind of play pattern of the deck.
Sure. So for example, one of the things that I clearly love to do, and we were actually even touching on this before we even began recording, the ability now that Jeweled Lotus is a thing, to drop Jeweled Lotus, drop your land, crack Jeweled Lotus, and then you have Marwyn out turn 1, and then you can play your Elvish Mystic or Llanowar Elf or whatever it is. So going into turn 2, you have 4 mana available to you turn 2, assuming you don't get Gemstone Caverns before games even begun. That type of interaction where you just get Marwyn out just as early as you possibly can to start getting more elves and more elves and more elves on the board is great. The thing that you definitely want to do with this deck is you want to make sure that you're keeping a hand with early drops. Obviously, you don't want to have a Shaya in your opening hand. You don't want to have Regal Force or something like that in your opening hand, because that's a dead card for too long for this deck. This deck is very fast. But if for whatever reason Marwyn gets killed, because that happens, and you have to kind of stumble your way through it, there is some things kind of towards the middle of the game where you can draw some cards like Rishkar's Expertise, Return the Wild Speaker, that sort of thing, to kind of pick up the slack a little bit. And it'll allow you to play some catch up. Another one of my most favorite things to do is there's a card in this deck called Weird Harvest, and if you have not heard of it, it's X green. Each player can search his or her library for up to X creature cards, reveal them, put them into their hand, then each player who searched their library shuffles it. So you give the whole table the ability to go find their 4 or 5 or whatever the number is best creatures that they have. So this is not a card you want to cast unless you're going to win the game, basically. But I have used that card to win the game, and I even remember the gentleman, he was playing a teamer deck, and he said, so how are you going to deal with my Platinum Angel? And I was like, Wreck Sage.
Yeah, that's the thing about Platinum Angel. He doesn't do anything when he dies. Weird Harvest, though. Jeez, this is another new card. Haven't heard of it before today, but this definitely is a Liz card. Liz loves those group hug style cards, so I'm sure I'm going to tell about her after this interview here, and she's gonna love it. That said, so we have now made it through the mid game. We have a full hand. How do we finish off? You mentioned Finale of Devastation earlier. What are some of the other key finishers in this deck?
Yep, so Finale of Devastation is definitely one. There's the loop of putting Umbral Mantle on, as I mentioned earlier, to where you can just keep doing the... excuse me, my mind went blank there for a second. You can even do like Staff of Domination to draw your deck once you have all the mana and stuff, to where you just have all the things in the world. So basically, you're either gonna win or deck yourself, pretty much. Wirewood Symbiote combo lines is definitely a thing in this deck as well. So look out for those as a potential win con, and you can obviously look up a lot of these the combo lines and stuff that I use on a website that EDH Rec. Is kind of behind, and it's called Commander Spellbook. So you can just type in Wirewood Symbiote and look up mono green, and there's going to be a few of those combos that are going to be in this deck. So
there's definitely several lines you could take depending on what you have on the board, what your opponents are doing. That might be more effective, less effective, depending on the board state, and you can then choose the appropriate combo line accordingly in those situations.
Exactly, and realistically, I think there's probably 6 or 7 combo lines maybe in this deck that I know of that I've personally played. Maybe there's more that I'm not thinking of, just because usually if I get one of those, it's game over, because it's hard to interact with it, and especially hard to interact with that much stuff coming at you at turn 4. But yeah, I mean, I would really be interested actually now to go through these cards and find out how many of them are combos that I didn't even know about.
Yeah, sometimes you just accidentally stumble across them in a game and it's like, I did not know my deck could do that.
Right. Well, and that's the thing with these types of powerful cards. The like 5 card interactions that I don't know about. It's definitely one. Like I've really been thinking about taking out something like a Great Oak Guardian or something like that, and putting the Kogla in there, just because Kogla and the Hyrex Tower Scout combo line is a thing. And Kogla only cares about humans, and this is more of an elf deck. So those are the types of really fine-tuning things that you have to worry about when you're obviously moving from just a casual, kitchen table type thing to something that you're trying to get ready for a more higher proud weekend.
And actually, kind of in that line, what other cards didn't make the cut for you? Either thinking about, maybe Kogla, but clearly he didn't make the cut. What were some other cards that you've looked at, considered, tried out, that just didn't seem to do it for you? One that I would love to have in this deck, again, that I just don't have the money for at the moment, is the 1-drop Allosaurus Shepherd. But in that same token, one card that I really wanted, it was a pretty spicy little elf. It's called Gaia's Herald. It says creature spells can't be countered by spells or abilities. So that's just a little 2-drop elf that just, basically does nothing but pump Marwyn +1/+1 and makes your stuff uncounterable. But with some of the redundancy, like for example, if I have Cavernous Souls, I kind of have a similar ability there with whatever I'm really trying to cast at that point. So I didn't really have room for something like that, if that makes sense. No,
Kogla was definitely another one too.
All right. And going forward with some newer announcements. There's still a lot of recent sets to come out and a couple coming up quite quick. Are there any cards that you want to try out in the deck that, beyond just being able to afford it, which obviously gets us all sometimes, but any cards that you've thought about trying out that you just haven't had the opportunity yet?
I have actually thought about trying to see what the difference would be to run the fetch lands in this deck, just because, I mean, I run 19 basic forests in this deck, which is kind of weird for a competitive deck or a higher powered deck, you know? So running, you know, all the green fetch lands or whatever so I can find forests and, you know, thin the deck out a little bit as I go and that sort of thing is something that I've considered, but obviously with Modern Horizons 2 coming out, those now might be the time to pick those up.
Yeah, those should be hopefully more accessible after this set
TCG
comes
link
out.
below.
Yeah, TCG player links. But no, 27 lands, 19 of force. I mean, it means you're less likely to be affected by those stacks players out there with their back to basics and their blood moons and their stuff like that. So I don't know.
Oh, yes.
If you don't need to have greedy mana, why even have greedy mana? All right, at this point, I want you, if you could, do us a dandy and just look right at your camera, stare down those people right at home, and give one last pitch as to why they should consider Marwyn as their next potential commander.
Okay, so Marwyn, first of all, if you love Elf Tribal and you like to go fast because this is green and it ramps like a beast, then what doesn't green do? It ramps, it draws cards, and you can beat down people with a lot of elves really quickly. So that seems like a pretty cool thing to do, right? And it's Tribal Commander. If you have not given Tribal Commander a try, and it's something that you're considering, I don't think that you're going to find a tribe outside of Elves that's going to be something that's going to be more powerful, at least at this power level anyway. So Marwyn is the mother of elves for a reason. She gets really big, really quick, and if you like to go fast, this is the deck for you.
Gotta go fast, like that Sanic character. All right, so yeah, one last refresher for those at home where they can find you, Create Commander.
You can find me on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch, all at Create Commander.
All right, I'll have those links as well in the description below that you folks can check it out. Beyond that, thank you all for joining us today. This was a fantastic interview and to one of the craziest tribes to ever exist in Magic. And it's been an absolute blast talking to you, Brandon. Thank you very much for joining me today. And all you folks at home, we'll see you guys again in the future. Say bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye, y'all.